What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. Yesterday's Hotfix patch got a lot of players angry for not being heavy-handed enough. That was because it was Blizzard's intention to not dumpster any heroes, just tune back the meta a bit. But in my opinion, Roadhog was changed so substantially that not only does he have a new playstyle, and he's not dumpster tier actually, he's good with some good matchups, but that has created a vacuum for a lot of experimentation of new comps and heroes to come through the woodwork. Until, of course, we find the most broken combos in the game. I'm working on my tier list for this patch, but before I finalize it, in today's video, I want to look at how you guys can adapt to this new patch, how some of the matchups are shaking up, including a lot of tips on how to proceed with the game as it is today. The big Roadhog rework has been a huge victory for the balance team in my opinion, because it's created some bad matchups for Hog, but also he still has some plays to make, and some new ones in fact. The one thing that he cannot do any longer, and you should feel he's easily countered if he does this to you, is try to lurk around the map, flank, solo carry for picks on his own. The reason is because there's a lot of characters that Hog can't one-shot now, and because of that, if you go off on a flank on your own and try to hook a target that you can't kill, they get healed, you used everything you have to go out of position just to probably get countered yourself. Because of her small hitbox, Ana likely can't get one-shot by Hog and has 2 cooldowns waiting to counter you if you can't hit that second shot in time, which you probably won't. That being said, Hog playing with your team a bit more to pull targets into your team's line of sight can still be useful, because it is the biggest range CC in the game and pulls a target from over there to towards your team, whereas a lot of the other stuns send the target away, like Rocket Punch or Orisa's Javelin. A surprising new benefit to look out for with Roadhog is his environmental kills. Because targets are 4 meters away from him now, he actually has a lot more power to pull targets exactly where he wants them. In the past, attempting an environmental kill might not work because the target will land on the ledge instead of pull all the way to the angle off of the map. With a bigger distance now, that happens more often. But another thing you can do is when playing on corners is actually kidnap an enemy. In this flats clip, he gets pulled and directly body blocked around a corner. In different iterations of the hook, this worked differently, so I don't know if this will definitely stay, because the interaction of where the character is placed after being hooked changes if the target's, let's say, too close, or when you reposition to reposition them, do they get yoinked around the corner? In this version, they do, so that's something to look out for and use to your advantage. Now I want to talk about the ramifications of this Hog redesign. There's some comps and heroes that I think have potential, and others like Junker Queen that I think are an instant win. Remember, Junker Queen got buffed in the previous patch, increasing her ability to lifesteal in a major way, and she has the type of shotgun that Roadhog kind of has now, but just a better version in my opinion. Now, while the Orisa matchup for Junker Queen's a little interesting, it's difficult to int at the enemy's backline because Junker Queen has the CC to punish you for doing that. So instead, Super plays this round of Sanctuary to one-on-one the Orisa a lot of the time, but only with the intention to farm lifesteal off her face. So while Orisa is an unkillable nightmare, Junker Queen, if she lands her abilities enough, and notably I'll say don't miss the knife throws on the enemy tank, you're going to be farming up enough lifesteal to mirror the amount of frontline brawling that an Orisa can have. Though I will note this might be a bit of a specialization, since landing these abilities are more important, whereas Orisa just pushes a button and automatically is sustainable. But even at that job, Junker Queen already looks okay. She doesn't look unplayable in that matchup, even if she doesn't easily win it. And then against other matchups, like for example, Roadhog, I think Junker Queen just laughs at, because he's even easier to hit with the knife, pulling him towards your team while you lifesteal and farm his face while he shoots back at you with an inferior weapon. I think Junker Queen has all the tools to just straight up win that matchup. So those are the previous 2 meta tanks. And from just watching a lot of high-level streamers in the last day or so, I think a lot of them are on board with Junker Queen being a pretty viable option right now, which is interesting because you might think, well, Junker Queen adds bleed and an anti. Doesn't Suzu just counter that? Yes. But Kiriko being strong in the game also enables Junker Queen, because one of the worst things you can do to Junker Queen when she is applying all of that bleed, and specifically with her Rampage ult, is to anti-nade her. And it's my theory anyway that Junker Queen will rise above in prominence to be the best Suzu target as far as the tanks are concerned, because her landing her lifesteal and having a counter to anti-nade means she'll just be giga tanky and keep getting her very lethal cooldowns back in a similar way that we just experienced with Roadhog, in my opinion. If you play her well enough, I think you can apply her status effects to too many enemy targets at once for Suzu to easily be able to just straight up counter you entirely. And of course, it's possible to force it out first and use your ult after. Now, I had a theory that because Hog destroyed main tanks, that with him changing his playstyle, they might rise in prominence. But I think we haven't really been playing with Winston or Reinhardt enough recently for the community to be good enough at those comps, because they are teamwork dependent. The thing is, the matchup between Roadhog and main tanks like Winston and Reinhardt, Hog still has some plays to make. Although he'll have to shoot them more times to do as much damage as before, he's got the ammo count to do that. He just won't burst them in the face as hard as before. But he's still going to be annoying to deal with for a main tank, since Hog can heal himself and his ultimate utterly rolls them. But I think this also matters what supports rise in prominence over time, because the main tanks really need a specific support set to combo with them to get use out of the armor health. And if we're playing Kiriko and Mercy, those enable the DPS way more and just don't have the burst healing options to make the main tanks viable. So I think it kind of ebbs and flows with that. And something to look out for in general. If Ana or Baptiste start to raise up a bit, I think Ryan and Winston might have potential, but at the moment, I still don't think they're incredibly strong due to the teamwork required to play them and how specific the comp will need to be. With that being so important, let's talk about Kiriko next. The big change in this patch was that there is an increased delay between full healing of Fuda casts. I emphasize that because there's a very important setting that you can toggle. Don't forget to turn off the toggle for healing a Fuda. This is important because if you use all of your Fudas, you're going to enact that new delay time. So in my opinion, it's much more punishing now to spam out your healing too far ahead of time. Before, the delay was short enough where you felt like you could just keep sending them out airmail ahead of time so that they land on the target as they take damage, since there's a slow projectile. That actually was like a big benefit in my opinion as well, something the devs didn't really think about fully. I feel that there's a benefit to the delay of the healing, that you can send healing pocket in advance for the duel to happen so that the healing hits them as they begin the duel, and then another burst is set on the way as they're continuing it. It's not as much of a downside as I think they thought it was, but now that there's a bigger delay between full healing of Fuda casts, try to manage how many of these cards you send out to make sure you don't run out at an inopportune moment. Because what I had originally thought is that this delay between casts was going to make her play a bit more like Baptiste, but the difference between him is because he can jump midair and his heals are area of effect coming from a high angle sometimes, it's a lot easier to switch from shooting the enemy to area of effect healing your team, hitting exactly where you want. Whereas the healing targeting for a Fuda, just like Mercy Beam or Zenyatta, can be kind of finicky to get it exactly where you want as you scan across your team. So as you go from shooting in one direction to trying to heal in another, you might be losing out on some healing switching targets that much, whereas in the heal bot playstyle, you're kind of focused in on the target you're pocketing, so you're not going to miss. This is something that I've noticed in some of the gameplay you guys have been sending in, is that some players' healing of Fuda accuracy is lower than it should be, and it comes from sending them out of sync or failing to lock on the target properly and sort of getting the right angle so you don't accidentally hit a different teammate or shoot it when it's not going to connect with your teammate. A byproduct of this that I felt is that there is more downtime in healing, so because of that, Kiriko is just like kind of straight up nerfed in my opinion, more than I would have thought, mainly because of this opportunity cost of the decision making in hectic moments where multiple targets are getting injured. It's a lot harder now to spam out lots of healing for everybody and switch targets really quickly, because again, you might have those gaps of downtime where you're not gonna be able to heal somebody when they need it. So what this does is make things that were already sort of a good matchup against Kiriko even stronger, and probably the way it should be. Cleave damage, like Winston hitting multiple targets, is a lot harder to manage, or in a straight up tank v tank Giga Chad healing duel in a tank mirror, higher healers are going to have a better opportunity to pocket their tank than Kiriko will, even when you account for sending some kunais out into the distance, because in my opinion, it's not like Baptiste, who can jump in the air and always has viable targets to damage and then heal. The positions you play as Kiriko, you're often going to have to turn a different direction to do meaningful damage, and your healing is in the other direction. But at the very least, be sure to be landing headshots on the enemy's tank when you can, in between healing yours. In the support category, I'd say a low-key winner in all of this is Mercy, who already was winning, but is winning harder now, mainly because with her synergy going down with Sojourn, the advantage of Mercy being paired with other DPS picks is even stronger. Kind of an interesting idea if you think about it. While Sojourn retains the one shot with a damage amp, in my opinion, I think she's probably still going to be played best mid-range, because other hit scans with a Mercy pocket will be able to eliminate her before she really gets rail. Hydron was a top Sojourn player in the Overwatch League this past season, and he was famous for taking these off-angle flanks. Notice how when he takes this off angle on top of the lighthouse, A, it's pretty hard to hit him at all, but B, using the spread of the primary fire from Sojourn's gun into a big mass of enemies lands a lot of hits and nets him an earlier railgun than the enemy Sojourn. Sojourn, allowing him to get the early first pick. It's my theory that it will be this version of Sojourn that comes back, not the Mercy pocketed version, as the top viable option, but probably only for top level players. At most other tiers, the peak discipline, in terms of peeking your head out to take any damage at all, is much more refined at the higher tiers. Whereas at most other tiers, players are just running around haphazardly. And what that means is the gameplay cadence of Sojourn to farm up for a rail, then go aggressive, fits a lot more in a more disciplined positioning style. But if there's more targets out in the open and you just need a shooting range, having more upfront damage might do you just fine at the lower tiers. And oh yeah, by the way, we're still back to the if you can't hit rails, Sojourn's not that great anyway. I think Sojourn retaining the overclock buff is insane, and she's much more of a tank buster now, because let's remember how they've reworked your ability to gain rail charge. You get 5 charge per shot no matter what, so you don't gain any benefits from damage amp, but also you don't take any penalties for shooting at fortification like Orisa's Fortify or Roadhog's Take a Breather, so you can farm them and then get rail. So in some cases, it's easier to get rail off the front line, but against barriers, you only get 1 point of charge per shot. Same thing against turrets and things like that. And because there is no headshot multiplier, I feel trying to farm squishies at range, I just suck at Sojourn, I guess, but I find it a lot harder to gain rail charge. But they kind of left the peak power of Sojourn because it's all in the railgun anyway. And so for everything I'm explaining at the higher tiers, I think she'll still be a pretty dominant pick, which makes this patch a bit of a head scratcher because I don't know if the average player was all of a sudden complaining about Sojourn. I thought it was more of a high tier problem now. But in any case, I think you'll find if you're not in the top tiers that other damage picks will be able to compete with her one-to-one in a more fair way. I got a lot of scoffs when I said this originally in season 1, but I thought Soldier 76 was a more viable option for the majority of players. So let's say the normal 90%. And I think that kind of trend is going to continue because it's not like Soldier needs to work up to a rail. He just constantly applies pressure and has an easier to use ultimate. So it's going to depend on your skill tier, in my opinion, which is a good thing, I think. Overall, for most players, a good balance patch, but not fixing it for the higher tiers at all. A few sleeper picks for you at the end of the video. I think Ana rises in prominence now because a little more emphasis is put on the tank fight, not just the sniper fight. Of course, playing against the Widow, get your head blown off, but there's more tank interactions to be had for longer now that Hog isn't one-shotting the front line. Ana has strong interactions against and with Junker Queen to boost up her self-heal or anti the enemies. Same thing with anybody who's still trying to play Hog, and she can sleep Ramatra out of his ultimate, who's another sleeper pick for me. Remember, he's one of the stronger options against snipers and has incredible tanky potential. So as long as the game slows down to his level, he can contribute a lot. And I got other characters I think are underrated right now, but I'll save that for the official tier list when we know more about this patch and how the community's playing it, because I think the community skill at certain team comps are really important right now. An interesting fact is that in the Asian region, they've been playing Winston through the Hog meta. And the reason is because that server has always been more teamwork reliant because they just have a different culture over there, which I find very interesting. And also why I'm low-key looking for main tanks and specifically Winston to have the potential to rise up, but I'm not so certain what's going to play around him in terms of supports and DPS, since I still think the sniper class has the highest potential and the flankers all in all are more fair and counterable, since the DPS passive biases towards slower DPS more. Last few shoutouts for the video. I'm gonna leave linked in the description a Google Forms sheet for you guys to submit your replay codes. Send in losses where you thought you played well but lost anyway, especially matchups and characters that you're struggling with. We can use them as examples in upcoming videos. Also, if Overwatch's patch isn't your cup of tea this time around, be sure to check out Mech Arena, which is also linked in the description. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave it a like and don't forget to subscribe, click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.